good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I am Marcia from Mom Hunts Dead People. If you're not in the members space over on the Ko-fi page, I have had neck surgery. I have had C3 through C6 fused, and I am still in recovery. But that doesn't mean that I can't pop out a video here and there. Today we are covering volume 2 of the Inquest, and we'll be going over Dr. Seabury, Bowen. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe recommend the channel too. All right, everyone, let's dig in. Dr. Seabury W. Bowen. Dr. Seabury W. Bowen? Yes. You're a physician? Yes. You live next to the Bordens? Yes. How long have you lived there? I lived across the street from Mr. Borden 20 years. You undoubtedly were well acquainted with the family. Yes, sir. And intimately so? Well, yes, neighbors. You were their family physician? Yes, sir. They did not need much doctoring. No, sir. Had you attended Mr. Borden recently, previous to his being killed? No, sir. Had you given him any bismuth powders or anything of that sort? Well, we're just in this a few seconds and we already have to go and be looking up some words here because I have no idea what bismuth powder is. A fine metallic powder with a low melting point, high density, and diamagnetic properties. It is used in various scientific and industrial applications, including metal alloys, solars, pharmaceuticals, and cosmetics. Okay, so we do use it for pharmacy. You can tell I'm not a pharmacist. Bismuth powder is soft, brittle, and oxidizes when exposed to air. Common side effects: tongue discoloration, black stools. Used to treat gastrointestinal orders, including gastric ulcers, dyspepsia. I know I've done a blog post about this before, and I really should go into a video on it. But a lot of times, names for medical things in particular simply change over time. And the example that I gave in the blog post was I have a rare disease. Currently, it is called intracranial hypertension, but it has also been known as pseudotumor cerebri or fake brain tumor. They decided to change that name because it doesn't give the severity of the actual disease. They changed it to idiopathic intracranial hypertension. They decided to change the name again because the word idiopathic did not lead to the severity of the actual disease, and it's currently called intracranial hypertension. So a lot of these words are simply a disease known by another name. Had you given him any bismuth powders or anything of that sort? No, sir. Do you know whether he had such things around the house? I don't know. Have you ever prescribed them for him? No, sir. Or for any member of the family? Not that I remember of. I don't think I have. So far as you know, was he a man that knew enough about that branch of science to take medicine himself if he had occasion to? That is a question I could not answer. I am sure I don't know. Assuming the bismuth was found in his stomach, you would not have any idea how it got there? No, sir. You had not been called that week to the family? No, sir. I had not been called. I went over to see them the day before yesterday, Wednesday morning, about 8 o'clock, or before 8. Mrs. Borden came to the door and said she was frightened, said that she was afraid she was poisoned. I told her to come in. She sat down, and she said the night before, about 9 o'clock, she and her husband commenced to vomit, and vomited for 2 or 3 hours until 12, I understood. Okay, if that happened, I wouldn't assume I was poisoned, maybe food poisoning, but my mind wouldn't leap to being poison. What morning was this? Wednesday morning. I asked her what she had eaten for supper, and she told me. She said she had eaten some baker's white bread, and she had heard of baker's cream cakes being poisonous, and was afraid there was something poisonous in the bread that made her vomit. She said she only ate cake and baker's white bread. At that time, she had a sort of an irritation of vomiting slightly. I was afraid she was going to vomit there. I rather got ready for her. I told her to go home and told her what to take, and she took it. Do you recollect what it was you prescribed for her? I told her to take some castor oil and take it in a little port wine to take the taste off. And probably that would be all she would want. I think immediately after breakfast. I thought they were neighbors. I would just go over. Before that, she said Lizzie came down. She heard them vomiting. I think she was in the next room, and she was up too, and she commenced to vomit at that time, about 12. I thought if they did not call me, I would go over and make a friendly call. I went over after breakfast. I think Bridget let me in. I am very sure it was the front door. I says, Mr. Borden, what is the matter? He looked at me and wanted to know if anybody had sent for me. I told him no, Mrs. Borden was over. I thought I would just come over and see. He seemed well enough then. He said he felt a little heavy and did not feel just right, but said he did not think he needed any medicine. I did not urge him at all, of course, and I went home. I did not think much about it. I saw Mr. Borden out 2 or 3 hours afterwards. When I went in, I saw Lizzie run upstairs. Mrs. Borden I did not see, because I had seen her before. Did you see Lizzie that morning? She was just going upstairs as I went in the front door. I thought it was her. I am not quite sure. It was somebody you thought was Lizzie. Yes, sir. Somebody I supposed was Lizzie. I did not see her face. And you did not talk to her? No, sir. You did not see them again to speak to them before they were killed? No, I did not see any of them to speak to them, I don't think. I am very certain I did not. Where did you afterwards see Mr. Borden? Did you see him Thursday? I don't remember of seeing him Thursday. I might possibly. I saw him Wednesday, walking along between the side door and gate. Lizzie I saw walking up the street, and I concluded they were all right, all of them. You don't recollect seeing Mr. Borden out on the street Thursday at all? I don't recollect it. Did you see Mrs. Borden on Thursday? No, I did not see her Thursday. I don't remember. Did you see Lizzie on Thursday before you were called in? I don't think I did. I don't remember seeing any of them. I started off probably at 9 o'clock. You go out on your travels at 9 o'clock or thereabouts. I intend to. Get back when, or no habit about it. I intend to be around probably once an hour if I can. What was the first information that you had of the tragedy? I drove up to my house, and my wife came to the door and made a motion, and she says, they want you quick over to Mr. Borden's. At the same time, I think Thomas Bowles, a man that works across the street, told me. At the same time, I don't know which was first. I thought probably they were worse, so I went right over quick. When you got there, who did you find? I found Miss Lizzie. Anybody else? Bridget. You were the first outsider then to get there. I noticed that he's not correcting the doctor from being like, we call her Maggie. He's just like, yeah, this is Bridget. Let's get on. Get on to the meat of the substance here. So far as I know, Mrs. Churchill had not then got there. No, sir. Did Miss Lizzie speak to you? Yes, sir. Tell exactly what happened now. I went to the door and I met them in the hall. I went in the side door. I thought I would get in there quicker. I was so much in a hurry, I happened to go that way. I met Miss Lizzie in the hall, and Bridget. I says, Lizzie, what is the matter? I spoke pretty quick. I says, what is the matter, Lizzie? She said she was afraid her father had been stabbed or hurt. I think the word stabbed was used. I says, has there been anybody here? She said no, not as she knew of it. I would not say that she said no. I take that back. She said not as she knew of, I think. She said she had overheard her father several times talking loudly recently, and said she was afraid of some of the tenants had had some trouble with them. That is just as near as I can remember it. That conversation took place immediately. The first thing. I says, where is he? The door was shut, as it usually is. I never saw it open hardly, between the kitchen and the sitting room. I went through the dining room. You said, where is he? What answer did she give? In the sitting room. She beckoned along through the dining room. I went through the dining room to the door between the dining room and the sitting room. That was directly at the head of the sofa. As soon as I got at the door, I could see the whole room and saw him. Of course, I was prepared for something awful, as I did not hear him and there was no sound. He lay there still and recognizable. His face was cut in such a manner I never should have known who it was. I stepped in a second, looked around the room to see if there was any disturbance. It struck me like a flash to see if there was anything left in the room. Then I went right back again and told them that their father was dead. I took hold of his pulse and found he was dead. Satisfied myself. I did not know that he was when I saw him. I took hold of his pulse and found him pulseless. Then I went back and informed them that he was dead. Then what? Then what did she say to that? Or what did she do? I can't tell. I don't know. I was stunned myself. What was said about the mother, if anything? There was an inquiry made. I don't know whether I made it. Somebody said, where is Mrs. Borden? Where is Mrs. Borden? Lizzie said, I think she said she had a note this morning to go and see a sick friend. That is all. Such a serious affair as that. I did not stop and could not do anything. I was satisfied of that. In that time, I said I must go and get some of the officers right off. Perhaps I said I would get the officers. Lizzie said that Emma was in Fairhaven and wanted me to telegraph her. Before I went out, she said if you telegraph to her, perhaps she will come on this noon train. I went directly across to my house and told my wife and told her about telegraphing. I was satisfied she could not come on the noon train direct. So my boy drove me down to the telegraph office, and I telegraphed to Miss Emma Borden. You had not then heard that the mother had been killed too? No, sir. Then I went across to Baker's drugstore. I mentioned the boy to come along. I stopped 2 or 3 minutes there and told them of it. When I came out, I got in my carriage again and drove directly to the house again and stopped at Mr. Borden's door and went in. There were no crowds there at the time that I remember of. I drove up on his side and told the boy to stand there. So now we're really getting into how the rumor spread so quickly that the Bordens were dead. The first thing the doctor did was go to the drugstore and be like, they're dead. Yeah, saw it. Dead as a doornail. And you know, they went all about talking to everybody else because that would have been sensational news. The whole lack of TV and internet and smartphones and all that. But then again, my trial hunters already know that anything that is going to involve a trial is going to be entertaining. It is, human nature is still some of the greatest entertainment on earth. Had the crowd begun to collect around there then? No, sir. The news had not got around? No, sir. I don't know as I saw anybody going in at that time. Then I went directly to the same side door and was met there by Mrs. Churchill and Alice Russell. I think Mrs. Churchill, I am sure, one of them, or somebody, I think Mrs. Churchill said, they have found Mrs. Borden. I said, where? She said she was upstairs. You better go up. Then I went upstairs. Up the front stairs. Yes, went up the front stairs. As I got to the top of the stairs, as soon as I got up on the second story, I could look right over the Deb, and I saw her lying there flat, prone. My thought was that she had run up there and fainted. I went right around the foot of the bed and satisfied myself in an instant that she was not living. I don't know whether I got hold of her pulse, but I satisfied myself some way. I don't know how, that she was not living. I went right downstairs again and told them Mrs. Borden was dead, killed the same instant. I think I said that. When you looked over the bed and saw the form on the floor, where were you? In the hallway? I think I must have been. I don't think I should probably have looked until I got up to the top of the stairs. I could, if I had been looking, have looked as soon as my head got level. I might have seen her under the bed. I went directly up fast, and as soon as I looked in the door, I looked over the bed. So where she was lying, you could see it from the head of the stairs. Not exactly. You would have to come up to the head of the stairs and go back a little. You went downstairs. And what then? I told them she was dead. Then it is pretty confused. The rest of it along there for some time. I could not say who they were exactly. They kept coming and going. I told Bridget to get a sheet and covered up Mr. Borden and kept the door shut so the women would not see and let the men go along. The crime scene being so open. Doesn't that just rankle you guys? Just like, I just covered them up with sheet, just let every Tom, Dick, and Harry just come through. We just covered up the body so that, the poor women folk don't pass out from seeing a dead body. But, everybody else, just coming right through. It's fine. Not the time for an open house. When you came back from going down the street, who did you find there besides those you named? I named Mrs. Churchill and Miss Lizzie Borden and Miss Russell and Bridget. Do you mean when I came back from upstairs? No, downtown. Whether Mr. Sawyer was there before I got back from downtown or directly after, I cannot tell myself. Mr. Charles Sawyer was there very near, I think, the time. Was he a neighbor? No, I don't know where he does live. I have known him some time. When you came down from upstairs, were more there? Yes, my wife was there then. I told her to go right home. Had anybody else besides your wife come? Could not answer to that. If you were not sure Mr. Sawyer had gotten there when you came in from downtown, was he there when you came down from upstairs? I know he was there, almost the first man. I could not swear to that. How long before the police officer came? Pretty soon after that. I don't know whether Mr. Allen came before Sawyer or not. I don't think he was there before it started downtown. Before you came back from downtown. I could not say. So far as you remember now, excepting The three that you have named, Sawyer possibly, and Mrs. Churchill and Alice Russell, were the only ones who had got there. And Bridget? No outsiders had got there but those three. If they were all there when you got back from downtown, I don't remember of seeing anybody. I would not want to say. It did not take you a great while to go down and back. I drove right down to the telegraph office quick. Your horse was there already. Yes, sir. You notified the police office. I notified somebody there to get the police. I told them at the house. When you came back? Yes, sir. At the house. The second time you came to the house, the crowd had not begun to collect. I don't remember of seeing anybody on the sidewalk. There was no carriage there as I drove up under the tree close to the door. You do not remember of seeing Morse when you got back the second time? No, sir. Nor when you got down from upstairs? No, sir, not directly. I did not see him for some little time. I don't know when. Had the crowd begun to collect a great deal when he came? Yes, a great many were there. I can't say who. People that I knew. I knew almost everybody that came in. Did Bridget have anything to say when you first went into the house at all? I don't know. I can't remember. Was Mr. Borden's body warm when you felt of it? There was nothing that attracted my attention. The main thing was I found he was dead. Which would more likely attract your attention? Because coolness would attract my attention. He was pulseless. That is what would attract me. If he was cold, it would attract my attention. You infer inferently that he was not cold. I don't think he was cold. I think if he had been cold, it would attract my attention probably. It might and might not. I felt of his pulse and found he was pulseless, and found he was dead. I did not stop for a minute in the room, I don't suppose. All right, so they're getting on to the fact that the body should have been cold, at least in the police's point of view, that the body should have been cold. But the doctor's like, I don't remember it being cold, which implied the murder was so recent that the body hadn't had time enough to cool down. But I don't find this really sus because we kind of already knew that it had to have happened very quickly. If you're to believe Bridget and Lizzie's story, Bridget was outside, Lizzie was upstairs, and then the murder happened. And by the time they got back inside, he was dead. So of course the body would still be warm. So I'm not entirely sure why he's making a big deal about the body still being warm. As he looked to you when you went in, was it pretty plain that he was badly cut up? Oh, yes, sir. I did not recognize him. I should not have recognized him. Was the blood on his face? Yes, the blood was on his face and his eyeball cut directly in two. He lay on his right side, and the right side of his face was not seen. I saw the whole of the cut then, and none of the healthy part. Did you recollect how Lizzie was dressed that morning? It is pretty hard work for me. Probably I could see a dress, something like it, I could guess, but I could not describe. It was sort of drab, and not much color to it to direct my attention. Sort of a morning calico dress, I should judge. Did she change her dress? She changed her dress sometime in the course of 2 or 3 hours. I noticed she had on a wrapper, I think, afterwards. She did not do that until she went up into her room to stay. When did she go up to her room to stay? It is a pretty hard thing that time. Very soon after the crowd, I should say. It is pretty hard saying how long. I could not tell. When you first came, you all came to the side door. Yes, sir. Where was the standing exactly? I could not say exactly whether she met me at the end of the entry or where. I could not say. I have the impression now that she was at the side door and opened the screen door, and the door was half opened and ready for me. That is my impression. Where was Bridget? She was very near. The entry is very short, and she was very near. I could not say exactly. What was Miss Lizzie's appearance and manner? Well, she was excited and, well, it is hard to describe it. She was somewhat excited, in a hurry for me to come, in tears. No, sir. What was Miss Bridget's appearance and manner? She was calm. So far as any excitement on her face was concerned, she was uneasy and excited in action, but not in her face. I don't think I am prepared to say much about that. Perhaps you did not take much notice of Bridget. I did not take much notice of either of them. The main thing was to see what the matter was, and get at it quick. The conversation with relation to Mr. Borden's having had trouble with some man was all right there. Yes, before I went in to see him. She said, Mr. Borden, I am afraid, is injured, or father. I don't know whether it was Mr. Borden or father. I'm afraid he is stabbed, and just the same as I have said. Was it not very apparent When you went in that he was not only stabbed, but very much cut up, was it not very apparent that he was very badly cut up? Yes. Have you attended Miss Lizzie since that time? Since it was done, yes, I have seen her every day. Has she had any physical difficulties, been ill? I ask mostly on account of the newspapers. They say she has had fainting fits. Nothing more than I should expect, nothing special, no more than I should expect from anybody that is undergoing a severe strain. Has she not fainted? No, sir, not fainted. By the way, I might put it in. It does not connect, but I will go back to the time when I came down the second time. I can describe her condition at that time when I came downstairs the second time, after I found the mother was dead. Miss Russell was at her side in a chair and was working over her at that time. In a minute or two, she got her into the dining room on a sofa or lounge. At the end of that, she was lying down and she was fanning her and had wet cloths put on her head, and they're working her over in that way. Was she faint? Not as I know of at that time. As I found 2 people murdered there, I suppose the rest would take care of themselves pretty well. Had you known of anybody working around the house there recently before that? No, sir. I did not know of anybody. If they had been, I don't know as I should have known it. Do you know whether Mr. Borden kept axes or hatchets? Oh, no, sir. You did not go into his affairs enough for that? No, sir. Never went into the cellar in my life as I remember of. Were you intimate enough with the family to know what the relations were between Mr. and Mrs. Borden? In what way? As husband and wife. Were they cordial and intimate and affectionate? So far as I ever saw, I never saw anything to the contrary. That is all I can tell, of course. You had no reason to suppose to the contrary? No, sir. Had you enough knowledge of relations to know what the relations were between Miss Emma and her stepmother? From all I ever saw and heard directly myself, I don't know anything but what they were. If you want hearsay, I can tell all there is in the papers. What did you know of the relations between Miss Lizzie and the stepmother? I think the relations were. I should judge by what I have seen them together a good deal. I should judge that the relations were harmonious and perfect and natural. Did you ever hear Lizzie say anything about her stepmother? I don't think I ever did. How did she address her, do you remember? Well, I don't know. I am sure I don't remember. I never was in the house except on business affairs and connected with sickness. Suppose Miss Lizzie and Miss Emma should say that the relations were not pleasant. Would you be surprised from what you have seen of it? If they should say so, I don't know anything to the contrary. I don't know anything in favor of it. I spoke from all I ever saw and heard directly myself. Did Miss Lizzie tell you at any time where she was when this thing happened? The first time when inquiry was made, where Mrs. Borden was. No, did she tell you where she was herself when her father was killed? Yes, she said the first time, or won't say when, very early, that she was out of doors, out to the barn, had been out a while. Did she say how long she had been there? No, I don't think she did. I don't remember her saying how long. I don't doubt, but I asked the question where she was. She said she was out in the barn. Didn't she say what she was doing there? She told me sometime. I don't know whether just then or a short time afterward, that she was looking after some irons or tins. The remark she made the first time was she was looking after some irons, not flat irons. I mean irons. It might have been pieces of iron. Irons was the words used. Says I, where was Bridget? I don't know, but I asked Bridget. Somebody said, one of them, Bridget had been washing windows, and she went upstairs and was upstairs when those questions were asked. Whether it was before I went down to telegraph or after, I don't know. I have the impression it was before. When was this that Lizzie told you she was out around looking for iron? I have the impression it was very soon after I went over first. Were you the first one to see Mrs. Borden? No, sir, I was not. I was sent up by Mrs. Churchill. Mrs. Churchill says, we have found Mrs. Borden. I says, where is she? She is upstairs. Go right up. Did you notice then whether the front door was shut or not? If it had been open, I think I should have known it. You did not attempt to go in or out the front door? No, sir. You did not notice whether the front door was open or not? If it had been open, I think I should have noticed it. I don't think it was open. Did Miss Lizzie have her meals sent up? You say she went to her room and stayed there? Yes, they got some toast. I think they went over to my house across the street and toasted some white bread for her. I don't think she ate it. I don't know about that, though. Perhaps they got some tea. Was Dr. Abbott there? Dr. Abbott was there sometime. Not that day? Yes, that day. I got a rumor that some comment was passed between you and him about the size and quantity of the amount of food that was sent up to her. Between Dr. Abbott and I, never a word. I would swear to that, not a word. I did not know anything about it. Never anybody except my wife has mentioned the fact. I knew Alice, I think, came over and got some tea and white bread toast, and I think my wife said she did not eat any of it, and something to that effect. I accidentally heard of it, that is all. Was Mr. Borden a man of quick temper? Well, no. I should not hardly think he was a man of quick temper. If they were going upstairs, does not that front door, if it is open, does it not shut off the stairs? You cannot go upstairs when the door is open. You have to shut the door to get up. The hall is so narrow. Is not that so? Perhaps so. Don't it open back against the stairs? Perhaps it does. I should rather think it did. That's a design flaw if there ever was one. At any rate, did you have to get rid of the front door to get upstairs? No, sir. If the door had been open, I should have seen it. Your impression is that the door was shut. Yes, a very decided impression that the door was shut. The marshal reminds me to ask you, don't you think on recollection, the first man that got there after you did was Officer Allen? Could not say. It might have been. Do you remember of saying to Mr. Allen, go and get the police as fast as you can? I said that to somebody. I was excited. Have you been able to fix the time when you first went over to the house? I have changed my mind on the time. I had no means, only guess at first, but I deliberated. And finding out as near I can, I must have stopped my horse in front of my house not very far from 10 minutes past 11. That is about 10 minutes earlier than I thought at first. But on asking my boy, he told me where I was at a certain time when the clock struck. By thinking it over sufficiently, I think it was earlier than my first impression. My first impression was just an impression. What was your first impression? Between 20 and 25 minutes. On further reflection, and judging from what my boy told me where I was and who we met at a certain time, I think it must have been quite a good deal earlier. About what time do you now think it was? Not very far off from 10 minutes past 11. It might have been 5 or 10 minutes either way. When I drove up to the house and went in. When you got the news and went in. Yes, sir, I could not have stayed in there more than 5 minutes. I went directly to the house and down to the telegraph office and must have been back at 11:30. You think you did stay in the Borden house 5 minutes? I don't believe it was more than 5. I'm only guessing. Do you think it was more than 2? It might not have been. Who was the first person you notified of the thing? The first person was in the baker's drugstore. Samuel Flint was in the drugstore, stood at the counter. I told him Mr. Borden was murdered. That was on your first visit downtown. I went directly from the telegraph office right to the store across the street. You wrote a dispatch there. I wrote a dispatch and paid for it and sent it. Have you looked at the dispatch to see what time it was? No, sir, I have not. I suppose the time would be on that. That would show exactly the time. That was the first thing you did afterwards. I drove directly to the office from my house. Had you just as lief go with Mr. Seaver over there and get out that dispatch and see if it marks the time? Yes, sir. After writing the dispatch, you told Mr. Flint. Yes, I went directly across South of Main Street. I was well acquainted with Mr. Flint, and I told him about it, and then left him and got into the carriage and drove back again to the Borden house and went in a second time. You did not notify any policemen or anything then? No, sir. How soon after you got back the second time was it before the officer got there? I don't know. I could not say. Where was you when the clock struck 11? My boy said that I was on South Main Street, and we met a fire department team near the head of Union. We heard the clock strike. You mean your own son? My driver. You don't know anything about that message from Mrs. Borden to go out nursing somewhere that day? No, sir. Is your boy around here now? Yes, sir. Now you figure from that it would take you something like 10 minutes to get down. No, it would not take over 5. How do you get at the 10 minutes? I have a leeway of 10 minutes. I did not mark it definitely. And that is the end of that. I can't say I'm a fan of how they just into these. He's just like, I gave myself a leeway. I know I should have taken 5. No more than 5. But I give myself 10 minutes, because things crop up. Cool, no more questions, dude. You're out. Like, what? Wait, what? What? But to summarize real quick, the whole purpose of this was to establish the timeline of the two bodies being found, who was present, and if you notice, there was a lot of questioning about Bridget and Lizzie's behavior. It felt to me, and it may feel differently for you guys, but it felt to me as if the officer doing the inquest expected them to be wailing and fainting and crying everywhere and just incredibly over dramatic the way we make fun of women in those times. They need the smelling salts and all that to revive them. Things that didn't actually happen, but we like to pretend they did. But it definitely feels like he's zeroed in on Lizzie and possibly Bridget, but we're gonna have to see where that goes. So everybody, that is all we have for today. So until then, everybody, happy hunting.